Dear viewers, welcome to your program Hearts Unveiled. I hope that you have time to listen to this episode today, because this is also an important topic about how to listen and the importance of to be a good listener and what the result come out of being a good listener or a bad listener. I have a privilege to have Reverend Mike with me in the show.
Yeah, well, thank you again. I'm glad to be back with you. And we survived the first one, and now we're going to do the second one on marriage.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about listening today. So I want you to be quiet, and I'm going to talk.
Okay.
I want you to listen.
I try to be a good listener.
You try to be a good listener. Try real hard.
Try, yeah.
And you know, that is actually one of the problems in marriage. People do not listen. I mean, you told me that little funny joke. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use it in that direction, you know? So I should listen 100%, talk 50%, and maybe things would be better. But you know, one of the things that contributes to an unhealthy marriage is that couples do not listen to each other.
One thing I watched it and saw in the people, like, they listen what in their head, not what the person talk. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, I listen what I expecting you to say.
Yes.
I'm not listening to what you say. And I practice that with many people, especially I'm doing like reaching out and talk with people. And when I started to speak, people started to answer before I finish. And then said, okay, I know what you say. I say, no, you don't know.
Right.
And sometimes, you know, I let them to talk. And then
they cut you off.
After they finish, I said, oh, this is what I like to say, not what you said.
Not what you said.
Yeah. Then here it's really, I don't know, I thought before I come to Canada, I thought it's just our culture back home, but I think it's a human being problem.
It's a big problem. And you know what is a big problem right now to a barrier to a good marriage? It's this thing right here. You ever go into a restaurant and you see a couple sitting there and they're just tapping on their phone and they're talking away? And sometimes I'll come home at the end of the day and I'm doing an email or a text and my wife is talking to me. And you know what? You're looking at me right now. She wants the eye-to-eye contact. And I'm doing my phone and saying, yeah, okay. And she's saying, you don't care. I'm not important. That message is more important. And so as we talk about listening today, there are many things that we do that actually drive our partner away. And we say very subtly, maybe we don't mean it, but we're not even thinking it, you're not important right now. I'm listening, but I got to do something else.
Yeah, this is one thing I believe also was like, you know, with time, if we go back like some few years ago, like maybe, I don't know, like 20 years ago, we'll see the thing is different before the cell phone and the internet and all this stuff. People can listen better than now. I just see now, like, for example, people use text and use emails more than to talk on the phone. Then
it is very frustrating.
The gift of talking and listen start to be not exist.
Exactly.
Yeah. And this is really problem. And like, you know, maybe after few, even with the churches, people used to text and write and communicate with this, they will not really manage to hear the sermon or like, you know, it's a problem in different area in our life.
Well, let's talk about marriage for a minute.
Yeah.
And let's bring it in because I think sometimes what we don't realize is that the person that we're married to, or it can also be with our children, it can also be at work. We often block people from hearing us. Now, I have not talked to you about this, but I could turn you off. So you say, I don't even want to listen to you. And in marriage, there are some things that we do, sometimes unconsciously. Maybe we've learned it from our parents, from bad role models. But I find there are 3 things that people do that cause their spouse to say, I'm not going to listen. I'm not interested anymore. And here they are. The first thing is when we're insensitive.
Yeah.
And that becomes, it's like, it makes the person deaf.
Yeah.
If I am mean to you, or you say, hey, can you help me with something? My wife says, help me, Michael, and I don't do it. She's going to think, well, what's that all about? So then when I come and talk to her, she's already built up resistance.
Yeah.
And could it be that as you're listening today, that that's something that you're doing? You have become insensitive. And your insensitivity to your spouse's needs causes them not to hear you, and you have a breakdown in communication. The last time that we chatted, we talked about being a servant. And a servant is someone who is sensitive to the needs of the person they're caring for. And that's what God calls us to do in marriage, to be sensitive to each other. But there's something else.
Yeah.
It's a little more painful. Yeah. And it's when we take being insensitive to the next level, and it's sarcasm. Mm-hmm. Sarcasm is very, very painful. We can say things like, you're dumb, you're stupid. We say that to our children. We can say harsh words, like, don't be a goof. And those are mild words to what actually happens oftentimes in a home. Maybe through swearing, through anger, we say things, and it's like we were putting a knife into the heart of the person that we once said we loved. And we get sarcastic. And we become sarcastic sometimes because we haven't learned the right way to communicate. I have discovered that what is very powerful is if you talk about texting, why don't you send a text message and say, I just want you to know how much I love you and why. I didn't tell you this, but I have 5 daughters.
Oh.
They're all adult girls. And I find myself every once in a while, I just have to text them because they live on the other side of the country. Yeah. And I'll text them and I'll say, I want you to know how much I love you, but that's not enough. Yeah. I still have to pick up the phone and I have to call them. Yeah. And you know, the other thing that they like their dad to do is send gifts, send presents. Yeah. So does my wife. And when I do that, it makes them realize that they are special and that then they want to listen to me and we can have a dialogue. But here's the third thing in a marriage where it blocks our hearing. We become insensitive. Sometimes we are sarcastic, and Jesus is able to change you from that. He doesn't want you to be that way. He says we're to speak the truth in love. He invites us in marriage to be an encouragement. But here's the kicker. Many men, okay, here's what I find. Many men think, oh, they're a rock star. They're pretty cool. And we make mistakes and we never apologize. There used to be a comedy show on TV 20 years ago called All in the Family with a man named Archie Bunker. Yeah. And Archie Bunker would always make excuses, but he would never apologize. He would never apologize. And so often in marriage, we run into a roadblock, we bump heads because we don't apologize. It's not enough to send flowers. You need to verbalize when you say and have done something wrong. So in other words, can't just say to my wife, I'm sorry. That's not enough. I need to say, and her name is Terry, I said, Terry, how I spoke to you was painful. I used the wrong tone of voice. I shouted. I was angry. I must have hurt you. Will you forgive me? That gives a whole different twist, and that brings healing to a relationship.
Yeah. Again, there is like also like some other thing also prevent people to listen.
Yes.
Like one thing, when we think we know what you are going to say. And we have a really good example of that. And it's very dangerous because if you think about Jesus when he went to raise Lazarus from dead.
That's right.
Martha, when he said...
Martha was his sister.
Yeah. Martha, when Jesus said to her, your brother will be rise, he will be alive.
Yeah.
She said, I know. He will do that in the resurrection day.
Yes.
And she doesn't know because she doesn't know what Jesus is going to do or going to say. Another thing, Jesus also warned his disciples from the Pharisees. When your words volume higher than your deeds, your work,
That's
and
right.
people will not listen to us, even like wife or between wife and husband, if the wife word is higher than the work,
Yes.
the husband will not listen. If the husband do the same, the wife will not listen. Even the children will not listen. That's why Jesus told his disciple here in Matthew 23. Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So do and observe whatever they tell you, but not the works they do. For they preach, but don't practice.
Exactly. We need to walk our talk. We need to live it out,
Yeah.
don't we?
We need to be a really true example, and we do what we talk and what we believe, or what we say that we believe, because can create lots of problem, especially. Or we can have. There are people. They are very, very nice talkers, but they don't do anything.
So we understand these principles, but when we come back to marriage in particular, or especially with my children, but there are things that I do that keep the communication from not connecting. You know, it doesn't mesh together. And how do I listen? And how do I really evident to people that I care for you, even to my wife? So here's 4 things, just very brief.
Yeah.
One is, in any relationship, one or the other, whether it's the man or the woman, one is more assertive than the other. And by assertive, I mean you're able to express your opinion. This is what I want. And a lot of times the other person, often the wife, she will not speak up, but she has certain things that she wants. So because the husband is so assertive, he never hears his wife. I was sitting at a table yesterday with a bunch of people talking, and there was one person that wanted to dominate the conversation.
Yeah.
So finally I said, thank you for what you said. Let's hear from this person now. And all of a sudden, that person who was so quiet, it was this little lady, very pretty lady, but very small, and just kind of overwhelmed by this other man that was talking so loud. Then she spoke up. And you know the funny part? She made more sense than he did.
Yeah.
But he was the loudmouth. So being assertive is hard. The other thing is this. We need to be self-confident. And I want to say to each of you that when you understand who you are, that you've been made in the image of God, you are a person of great worth. You need to be able to speak up and not be embarrassed for who you are. Your opinion and your thoughts, they count. Another thing, though, that breaks down a relationship so I don't listen is when we avoid tough subjects.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we say, oh, I'm not going to deal with it. And we don't deal with things for sometimes a week, maybe even a year, sometimes 3 or 4 years. We never deal with it. And in a good relationship, you're not going to avoid things. You're going to tackle the problem straight on. And I think the last thing that I'd leave, and then we'll jump back to you, is that, you see, it's when one partner always dominates. They're always right. A lot of times, it can be the man. But sometimes it can be someone else. It could be the woman as well. But that breaks down the communication. And again, we come back to Jesus, who talked about being a servant. He gave up his rights. So even if you're the strong personality, we need to learn from Jesus. He gave up his rights. God became man in the flesh. He humbled himself, and he came to the earth. You talked about being humble. That's a challenge, but we need to look to Jesus for the example.
Yeah. Oh, I believe like listening also, it can solve problems between husband and wife, and even with any kind of leadership.
Very much.
I met a person one time. That's why I did I do a session about how to reach out to Muslims and train in the church, and he was in the class, and then he asked me if we can do coffee together. And then when we had coffee, I met with him. He spoke for more than 2 hours. But I found out
How
after
did you feel? How did you feel?
I found this person, nobody listened to him. He likes to speak. That's why I just listen. And I know, like, you know, it's hard, but I respect him. I listen to him. And then I found out that there is no communication between him and his wife. He became a very good friend. He has a good heart. He's a very person. He can help people. He has a good, but he doesn't find person to listen to him, to care about him. And if this works with a person that I didn't know, just I knew him for a while, but he became a friend, how this be effective if we listen to each other in marriage?
Well, we need to listen to each other, but we also have to be aware of how we come across, how we communicate. Because you're very patient to sit there for 2 hours. I want to have a dialogue back and forth. And if I just listen, then my goodness, that's an incredible gift. But maybe there's a point where he needs to stop and ask you a question. Because then you begin to think, well, is anything about me important?
Yeah, I know it's like you can't do that all the time, but like for the first time, I found a person, nobody listened to him. He likes to just talk. And I think this is make, like, you know, a friend, and we start even to talk and do dialogue. Anyway, what I mean here, sometimes listen is a medicine.
Yes.
For the other. It doesn't have to be for me. Like, and here again about what God did for us and what Jesus has done for us.
Exactly.
Like, he didn't see where his rights in us, but he found what we need, and even love. And I believe also, if you love the person, you can listen to the person. If you don't love the person, you hate to listen for him for 1 minute.
You know what else that I've learned is so key in a relationship? It's learning to ask the right question. I love the story in the Old Testament. It's in the book of Nehemiah. And Nehemiah, in chapter 1, we discover that he listened to his brother Hananiah. He had an amazing job. He was a captive in the land of Babylon, and he was the cupbearer to the king. So God had put him in that place. And all the people that would come to see the king, Nehemiah would hear them. He would see them come. And his brother Hananiah came back. They were 800 miles away rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem. And it says that he asked him about the people. And when Hananiah spoke to him, he said, things are very bad. Things are very hard. Nehemiah asked the right question, but then he went away and he processed it in his heart. And if we learn to ask the right questions and we listen, sometimes what people are saying with their heart is important. And as a result, God spoke to Nehemiah through what Hananiah said to him, his brother. And God began to move in Nehemiah to go back and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. It was an incredible miracle that happened. It would almost be impossible, but Nehemiah first listened and God got his attention.
Well, you mentioned Nehemiah because it's really a wonderful lesson to learn from Nehemiah.
Yeah.
He asked the right question, as you said, and then he came to God. He did something, we need to do it. First, when he confessed, he confessed his sin first.
Yeah.
Because sometimes also we justify what we do.
That's for sure.
And sometimes because we are in comfortable zone, then we see that, oh, we are blessed by God, we are better than others. Nehemiah put himself among those who did sin against God. Because when he prayed, He said, I and my father's house
Yeah.
sinned against you. Second, he didn't say, oh, because we forgot your commandments. We forgot what you say.
Right.
No, he said, I remembered what you have commanded to Moses. I'm just translating from Arabic. I remember the verse in Arabic. I remember what you have commanded to Moses. If you be honest, God will protect. If you don't obey the commandment, then he will scatter you. Then hear what we need to do when we listen as well.
Yeah.
And when we ask the right question, we need to confess, and we don't need to justify ourselves, because the first thing we do when you come to talk with me and say, oh, Thabit, you did wrong thing, the first thing I just try to fight back.
Yep.
And say, no, I try to justify. But we need to learn to know, we confess what we do wrong. I think this is helpful also in the marriage.
Very much in the marriage, because I need to be listening to what my wife is saying, because sometimes, I don't know about you, she's asked me to do things more than once, maybe twice. Okay, so let's talk about that, because we laugh, right? And I get that, I laugh too.
Yeah.
But many times we get frustrated in our marriage because the other person doesn't listen. Say, well, I heard you, but we don't change. You want to know something that happened once? I was talking to a man whose marriage was falling apart, and his wife had basically said, I'm leaving you. So I sat with him and I said to him, if I was talking to your wife right now and I was to say, what are two things that your husband does that always bothers and irritates you, could you tell me? And he said to me, oh, absolutely. I know what I do that bothers her. And I said, well, why don't you change? He said, I'm not going to change. She's got to change. And I saw the hardness of his heart. He was listening, but there was no change. And if I am really saying that I'm listening to my wife, then I need to change.
Yeah.
So, you know, on a simple thing,
Yeah.
I learned that at the end of the day, or first thing in the morning before I leave, I need to fold my clothes and not leave them on the floor. Because she is very neat.
Yeah.
But if I'm always dropping them on the floor, I'm saying, you be my servant.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not being sensitive.
No.
Am I listening to her heart? Or if she says, you know what, don't leave all your dishes on the counter. These are just little things. She says, I like things neat and clean. Well, I'm saying, well, I only like to clean once a week. Well, no, I've got to cooperate in marriage. And there's going to be tension if I am not listening. People laugh at this and they say, well, those are just small things, but it's the little things that build up. And then what happens, you start to drift apart. And you can be in the same bed, but it's like there's a cement wall between the two of you.
Well, I know, like many people, they have just, they call it like, you know, they just under the same roof, but they are not married. Yeah. But you know what I mean, like, you know, it's even, it's very important to listen, like, you know, and I'm very thankful I have a good wife. She always forgive me, but you know. But thing is that I don't know, when she ask about fixing something in the house and stuff like that, and say, oh, I like it's for me. Maybe later, but she always remind me.
She reminds you.
She reminds me. Yeah. But it's really good to see what we do wrong and confess it and change. This is really, really important to keep our marriage really run well, and it's something we need to do it. We need to change, I believe, and according to, you know, the Word of God, and according to, you know, the practical way of appreciate the person that you live with, or appreciate your body, because she's your body and you are part of her body, because God bring us and united.
I think a key thing, I don't know how much time we have left today, but I think
another 7 minutes.
7 minutes
or 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Okay. Well, there's a number of things that we find difficult to talk about, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say it here on your television program, but let me just talk about 3 things that keep couples from drawing close together. Normally it's after they're married, okay? But there are three things that they find difficult talking about. And they can hint at it, but they won't address it. And the first thing is this, especially in the North American culture, where sometimes people have had different relationships. And so suddenly you're now married to a person, but you've had relationships in the past with other women, or perhaps the woman has been with other men. You need to talk about that. You need to confess that, and you need to forgive the other person so you can move on. It's the price of sin. And what happens is that we compare ourselves to the other person. And that creates a feeling of insecurity, either for the man or the woman, wondering, is she comparing me to her other boyfriends or the other people that were in her life or not? So that's a reality that people are dealing with. I think the second thing that we find difficulty talking about is finances. Yeah. And I find that because it's an area of pride, that many times the man doesn't want to deal with it. There's not a plan. And so when I work with couples, I say, put together a financial plan. Jesus talked about being a good steward.
Yeah.
The Bible talks so much about handling money.
Yeah.
And if you don't handle your money will handle you. And it drives families apart. Because a lot of times, the lady is expecting the husband to provide.
Yeah.
She's taking care of the children at home, and he's not bringing home enough money. Yeah. And maybe she wants to spend it on something, and he doesn't. He says, no, that's not important. Well, maybe it's important to her. So there's a breakdown in communication. And we say, if only I had more money, then I'd be happy.
Yeah.
That's not enough. And then guess where this all ends up?
Yeah.
In the bedroom.
Yeah.
If you're not talking about, if you haven't dealt with past relationships, if you haven't dealt with your financial plan, and if you're not listening to each other, couples have a very bad sex life. They say 90% of the problems in a marriage are communication. Only 10% is sex. Yeah. But where there's no communication, 90% of the problems are sexual. God wants us to be one man and one woman to come together, but we need to clear up all these bricks so we can have a loving relationship.
Yeah, I think we need to, thank you so much for having this teaching and be in our program, Hearts Unveiled. We come to the close, and I'd like to thank you, but also I'd like to remind our viewers also that one time when Adam did sin and God comes to talk to him, he said, the woman that you have given to me, or you made her to come with me, she gave me to eat. And he blamed his wife. And everyone blamed another. And this is not a really healthy marriage, because Adam should confess his sin, Eve should confess her sin. And thank God, because with what Jesus has done on the cross, he saved us from the curse of sin that Adam did. And he represented of us, and Jesus represented of us, of our redemption. He's our Redeemer. Then we can change the language. Instead of the woman that you have given to me, she make me to do sin, we can say to God, thank you for the woman that you have given to me, because it's a blessing from you. And the wife can say that also. The husband is a gift from God. If we deal with each other as each other gift from God to another, I think we try to really listen to each other, talk to each other, love, and really be humble and confess our sin. And we have a wonderful relationship if we see each other as gift or treasure from God. Dear viewers, if you have question or comment, please contact through email or phone. God be with you.